We are live.
I'd like to welcome everybody to the regular meeting of the East Hampton Town Trustees. And I think we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, tonight we're going to start in public comments. We have a presentation with the South Fork Wind New York State Fisheries Work Plan. And Trustee John Aldred has done a ton of work on this, and I'm going to pass it off to him.
Okay, I just have a short couple of sentences I'd like to read. So the trustees have long considered the nearshore ocean fishery an important part of our trust. Early on in this process, concerns were raised about possible disruptions a cable landing could have on fish stocks. Partially responding to our request for fisheries studies to address these concerns, in 2019, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management carried out a literature review of the effects of EM electromagnetic frequencies from transmission cables on fisheries resources. An essential item for our support of this project was a field study of the impacts on local fish stocks and their movements, carried out by local researchers. Certificate condition number 137 of the joint proposal was designed to address that. It is our hope that utilizing the Stony Brook University, Monmouth University, and Cornell Cooperative Extension teams, who have extensive experience working in Long Island waters and are in tune with local conditions and sensibilities, will lend credence to an acceptance of their findings by the community. And is Mila here?
Yeah, I am. I think following up on what John said, I just wanted to explain a little bit about procedurally where we are in this process. So following the joint proposal and certificate condition 137, which require the development of a fisheries study, the subject matter experts and the fisheries study working group participants developed a proposal that was filed as part of the EMCP. So the EMCP was filed at the end of April, and there's been an open comment period that will end on June 4th, in which members of the public and stakeholders can provide any feedback that they have on the EMCP in general, as well as the fisheries study within that. Once that comment period ends, the applicant will, or sorry, the certificate holder will take those comments into consideration and possibly revise the EMCP or respond to comments that it does not agree with. They'll then publish an updated EMCP, and the public will again have 15 days to respond to any changes that were made. And then eventually it will be filed with the commission, and the commission will have the opportunity to either approve the EMCP as is or make additional changes. And once that happens, they'll publish a final decision on the EMCP, and then that would sort of bring a close to this process, but give open up an appellate right or a right to request a rehearing if there was a major issue with that. So I just provide that as a little bit of background on where we are, and looking forward to hearing from Melanie and some of the subject matter experts about all the hard work that went into the study itself.
Mila, could you please explain what EMNCP means for everyone?
It's the Environmental Management and Construction Plan, and it's an additional document that accompanies the joint proposal and just has a lot more detail about how the project will be built and certain aspects of it, and so sort of some fine level drawings and specifications that weren't previously addressed when the certificate conditions for the joint proposal were first drafted.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'll turn it over to Melanie to begin the presentation. Okay.
Thank you, Mela. I hope everybody can hear me. My name is Melanie Guerin, and I'm the permitting manager on the South Fork Wind Project. And I'd like to thank the trustees for the opportunity to present this important research tonight. As many of you know, the South Fork Wind Project is a joint venture between Ørsted and Eversource. We do have several South Fork Wind team members here tonight, including our in-house fisheries scientist, Dr. Greg DeSells, who's been very much a part of working with the team, our subject matter experts on developing this research program. We also have Jennifer Garvey on the phone. She is our development manager out on Long Island. Many of you know her. There's members of my team on the phone from the permitting team, Rob Soden, Jeff Westermeyer, and we also have Marvin Bellis from Eversource on tonight. So we'll be here to answer any questions about the project after we give our subject matter experts a chance to present. Mela and John did a really nice job of setting us up and kind of giving the backdrop as to how we got here. We were working through this Article 7 process, and as a result from settlement, we worked out this condition that Mela just ran through and John mentioned that establishes a need for us to comply with doing fisheries research along the export cable route. So since we've set up that condition and it's been memorialized in the Article 7 certificate, we've been engaging marine scientists and fisheries scientists, local and regional, to the Long Island area to help us design this work and implement it. I'm happy to say that we've come quite a long way here. It's really great to see. We're close to mobilizing, which is very exciting. So with that, I am going to hand it over to our group of SMEs. As John said, they consist of members from Stony Brook University, Cornell Cooperative Extension, as well as Monmouth University. So I think I'm going to pass it over to Mike Frisk. He's going to kick us off and introduce the team from Stony Brook. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I would like to thank the trustees for giving us a chance to present our research plan. And today, 3 of us are going to be speaking, and I'll go over all our members once I get the presentation shared here. Okay, does that look good on everyone's screen?
Yes.
Yep. Yes.
Thank you. So again, thank you for letting us present our research. Our research plan, my name is Michael Frisk. I'm a professor at Stony Brook University in the School of Marine and Atmospheric Sciences. Our team includes Keith Dunton at Monmouth University, Brad Peterson and Robert Serrato, who we're going to hear from both of them today, and they're both from the School of Marine and Atmospheric Sciences here at Stony Brook, and Matt Scafani, who's at Cornell University Cooperative Extension. And so we're going to start by having Bob Serrato go over the process that got us to this research plan. And then Brad Peterson's going to talk a little bit about the potential effects of electromagnetic fields on fish behavior. And then I'm going to go over some details on the project design. So I'll turn it over to Bob Serrato.
So we're sharing the same computer just to make things easier. And so I just want to present a couple of slides talking about how this whole proposal got organized. And the history of it is not terribly complex, and it should just take a few minutes to go over. So Ørsted initiated discussions in early 2020 to suggest that a passive acoustic array could be deployed to look at whether the wind farm cable had any effect on the movement behavior of a variety of resource species. And they organized a working group. The working group members are shown in the table on the bottom right, and it consisted of individuals from Ørsted and their associates, a group of individuals that would be potentially partners carrying out the research, mainly university and Cornell Cooperative Extension personnel, and then individuals that were resource management specialists or had environmental interests, including East Hampton Trustees and the New York Department of Environmental Conservation. And this original working group had goals to establish what was needed in terms of research, to discuss the scope of the project, and to figure out who would actually carry out the study. A suggestion was made very early on, within, I think, the second meeting, maybe it was made, to form a smaller group of resource matter experts to develop an actual fishery study proposal. And the resource matter experts are shown in this other table. It's fewer groups involved, and even though the number of groups shrank, the discussions actually expanded to consider not only acoustic telemetry, but trawl surveys, a beta remote underwater video system, and benthic sampling. And after the discussions, the group settled on two main ways of assessing the effect of the cable: acoustic telemetry and trawl survey. And so that's how all of this started. I am going to now, are we going to keep this, or?
Yeah.
I'm going to now turn this over to Brad.
Hello, good evening. John mentioned early on about the BOEM's literature search, which was really a desire to come up with kind of what's the state of the knowledge about electromagnetic fields. And what I'm trying to illustrate here on this slide is that there's two things that are going on. As the power is driving through the cable in that center figure, there's shielding in the cable, which is going to prevent any kind of electrical field from getting outside. But the magnetic field will extend beyond that shielding. And it's thought that it'll extend, something to like 30 feet on either side of that. And any water movement or animal movement through that magnetic field will then create an electric field. And so these are the issues that people are concerned about, is this idea of this magnetic field being induced outside, and then the water movement or animals moving through that magnetic field creating electrical field. Bob, could you go to the next slide, please? So this is another figure from that BOEM kind of state of the knowledge, looking at animals that may be particularly susceptible to these magnetic fields. So the thing to keep in mind is that there are very many natural occurring magnetic fields, and animals use these magnetic fields in a number of ways. And so the concerns are how fish that can interact with this magnetic field. Some of them use this for foraging, and so this may be an issue. The sharks and the stake gates have these very elaborate sensors, these ampule of Lorenzi, that can detect these fields. And so these are species of concern. And finally, this idea that many marine species can use these natural occurring fields for migration and to understand where they're going. And so how may this cable magnetic field disrupt potentially or confuse in those migratory patterns? And so these are the kind of the elements that came out of that report of unknowns and things that need to be determined, which is what we used moving forward with the design of this work.
Okay. So now I'm going to go over our research objectives, the technology we're using, the array design, the species that we're targeting in our study, as well as our timeline. And before I go over these two objectives, we wanted to be able to answer really two overall questions, and that is whether or not the electromagnetic fields produced had the ability to impact migrating fish as they move along coastally, sort of broadly. So you can think about species that move along the coast of New York, like striped bass, Atlantic sturgeon, bluefish, just to name a few. And so we wanted to capture whether or not that broad movement was affected in any way. The second part of our overall goals was to understand sort of the fine scale movement. Would animals that are more resident around the cable itself be impacted by the electromagnetic field? And the two objectives that we have, sort of the overall objectives, are to evaluate the effects of electromagnetic fields on behavior and movement on targeted species pre and post construction, and to evaluate the effects of the South Fork export cable on fine scale changes in behavior and movement in the near field environment around the cable. And to give a little background on the technology we're using acoustic telemetry. And on your bottom left, this is one of the acoustic tags that we surgically implant inside a fish. This tag sends out a unique signal that can identify that individual. And if it's within 500 to 1,000 meters or so of a receiver shown here in the bottom middle, we'll get a detection and we'll know that it's in that location. We'll know the individual and the time that it was detected. We also, in this project, are going to be deploying tags that have the capability, and deploying in some of the species that have the capability to detect acceleration, depth, as well as internal body temperature of the fish. And on the top left is a photo of a winter flounder that we just are completing, implanting a tag in it. I think that was in Mattituck Creek. And then we're going geographically quite a ways away, but to the Bahamas, where we're tagging a shark, a much larger species of shark down in the Bahamas. So once we have these tagged individual fish out, we have to be able to pick them up in our array system. And we use two different setups for this project of acoustic receivers. The first one, shown on the left, is a receiver that is attached to a mooring on the bottom. It has a submergible float at the top, and which keeps it upright. When we're able to, when we want to download it, which we're going to download the receivers every 4 months in this study, we send a signal down from a vessel that triggers a release. It floats up to the surface and can be easily picked up by a research vessel. And we've actually had great success with the acoustic release receivers in terms of recapturing them. The RV Palmanock is the vessel we're going to use, that's shown in the center of the screen. This vessel is very convenient for us. We've used it for several years, maintaining arrays on the coast of Long Island. It's also located in Shinnecock Bay at the Southampton Marine Station, so it's very close to the site, and as a nice vessel for this kind of work. We have a second kind of receiver set up, and that's the real-time receivers. And we have 3 of these that are going to be placed closer to the beach. And these actually have a float on the surface that's shown there, a buoy, and that buoy is equipped with a solar panel, a battery, and it is connected to the acoustic receiver below. And it provides the ability to communicate with cell towers, so that when a tagged individual comes by a receiver, the receiver picks it up, and then it sends it off to the cell tower and to the researchers. So it's a pretty neat setup. And I'll talk a little bit more about those when I go over the project, the array design. Okay, so this is our South Fork Wind Farm acoustic array design. And I want to just remind you, I started by saying that we sort of had 2 overall goals of the project. One is to look at whether or not coastal movements are being impacted in any way. and also fine scale behavior adjacent in the immediate near field of the cable. So what we've done is we've set up a west approach and an east approach. So these are going to get fish migrating that are migrating along the coast. We'll get pings from them as they go through that array. And if they're tagged with some of the other, some of the tags that have depth, acceleration, and temperature, we'll pick up that information as well. And so we have them approaching from the west and approaching from the east. And then we can compare that to any potential changes in behavior that might be observed along the cable route, which is shown here in this dashed red line. So that's the first component. The second component is to look at the fine scale behavior in the near field area around the cable itself. And this grid right here, this rectangular grid, is a fine scale positioning array, so that for all of the tagged individuals, when they move into that area, we're going to be able to track their movement in 2D, so that we can see how they move around spatially. And we're also going to be able to track individuals with depth tags on a 3D scale, so that we'll know not only where they're moving spatially, but whether or not they're moving up and down in the water column as they pass over the cable. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this on the next slide. And then the third component are these three stars, which are the real-time array system. And they're positioned close to the beach, so we can get information close to the beach area on the fish that are present in that area, and that also extends the array lines closer to the beach. And again, this will provide real-time data for telemetred individuals that are detected in the real time by the real-time receivers. Okay, so I wanted to go a little bit over the fine scale positioning, which is can provide some really interesting data. This is actually an example of brook trout in a freshwater pond system. And this particular setup is triangulating the detections of a telemetred individual, and it can produce a map that looks like this, which is basically a heat map where you have the brighter colors are showing areas of aggregation and high use. And then the areas that aren't lit up or not lit up at all are areas where the fish are not occurring. So if you kind of can picture this with our rectangular array with the cable running through the center of it, this will give us a nice view of whether or not fish are attracted or whether they move away from the cable area while they're resident in the near field acoustic array. So this is going to, I think, produce some really interesting data and give us a real nice view into the fine scale behavior and any potential effects that could come from the electromagnetic field. A couple things that I wanted to point out. This figure shows existing arrays along the coast of Long Island that are maintained by Stony Brook University and presently funded by New York DEC. If you look out to the east, you see the Montauk Array, and you move west to Fire Island, Jones Array, as well as the Rockaway Array. And I will note that we've also gated Great South Bay. And of course, our array is going to be further to the east, in between, Shinnecock and the Fire Island Array. So not only will we be able to look at any differences in behavior in terms of the two approach arrays on the array we're putting out, we'll also be able to compare that to all these other arrays and how fish are moving through them. Again, as another way of comparing any changes to behavior. I will also point out that we're members of collaborative networks that have arrays up and down the East Coast. And so the fish that are taken for this study will also provide useful information for longer distance and broader migratory movements. Okay, so we spent a lot of time talking about what species we wanted to focus on. And we talked about recreational and commercial fishing interests. We talked about ecological interests. And we also considered whether or not the species are on the more likely end relative to others to potentially have effect from an electromagnetic field. And to start with, we're going to tag striped bass, some 340 individuals, and striped bass is going to be equipped with tags that can detect depth and temperature, or acceleration and temperature. So for striped bass, we're going to be able to see whether or not they're changing their position in the water column, whether they're changing their acceleration. And also for striped bass, we'll be able to do 3D positioning inside the fine scale positioning array. We are tagging, additionally, we're tagging winter flounder, black sea bass, summer flounder, and skates. Skates being one, as Brad pointed out, elasmobranch ring species that have enhanced abilities to detect electromagnetic fields. And we're going to take a total of 70 individuals of each of these species for a total of 620 tags. But we also have quite a few other animals that are tagged presently, and tagging is going to be ongoing in some other projects, which will also contribute data to this project. And these will include individuals of skates, Atlantic sturgeon, as well as additional finfish species. And the data from these, or the data from the sharks and sturgeon, will be obtained from our group, as well as Monmouth University efforts. And in total, we have right now 200 plus telemetred sturgeon, 267 elasmobranchs, and these include large shark species down to skates and dogfish, and 99 finfish. And actually, the finfish numbers have been changing because this is one of our tagging seasons. So these numbers are a little out of date. We have tagged additional individuals in the recent past, and those efforts are continuing. We also have collaborative networks. There's some 3,000 active tags out along the east coast of the US, and they all have the potential of coming through this system, including 400 striped bass and 600 Atlantic sturgeon. Okay, so I wanted to, before I end here, I wanted to briefly go over our timeline. And you can notice that we're a little bit behind. It took a while to set up everything between the organizations, but we are making great progress. We have all of our orders in. We are tagging now, and we have more additional tags coming, and hopefully we'll be deploying the array in the next few weeks as the company that makes them finishes our order and ships those products down to us so we can get them out and deployed. Just a couple other things to note here. We'll download every 4 months, and so that's a fairly quick turnaround, but it gives you better guarantee of the data in case any of the receivers got damaged or lost for whatever reason. So that was a security we built into the project to make sure that we're getting the data. So that's where I was going to stop, and I'm happy to elaborate on any aspect of the project. So I welcome any questions.
Michael, this is Rick Drew.
Yes.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
Good. The project timeline is something that has been talked about quite a bit. We were talking about a potential fish study going back to 2017, maybe even 2016. The project has gone through a very rigorous review locally at the state level, at the federal level. And, clearly it's taken longer than I think everyone has expected. But when I look at the timeline here for pre-construction, we don't see a lot of runway. And I am familiar with the gray fish tagging programs that are out there and have a lot of support from the recreational fishing community. I believe there's 10,000 professional fishermen involved in that research project. And it clearly takes years to get meaningful data for analysis with these types of studies. can you please elaborate on the pre-construction phase of the project and how you guys are going to manage this, given that it looks like we're about a year behind schedule and really not a lot of runway?
Sure. So, the amount of time needed for data, obviously depending on how many tags you get out there, but for the acoustic telemetry work, we have, we get a lot of tags. And I don't know which tagging program you were referring to, but if they're, sort of more generic tags, it takes much longer to get information back on those. So, for instance, with sturgeon, just as an example, we see just about all the sturgeon we tag every year moving through. And so it doesn't take that many years to start getting an idea of what's going on. And I'm just looking at the schedule myself, and the Ørsted folks might have an update on their schedule for construction, but we plan to be out in the next, it depends on how fast the equipment gets here, but in the next month or so, starting to deploy. And so I think we do have enough of a runway to get a baseline.
Well, okay. Am I right in that you have these tags that are part of other research projects, that data is available and able to incorporate into this pre-construction portion of the survey?
Yeah, so for those projects, the animals that come into this array that we're talking about today, we will use that data from those tagged individuals.
So it's not a case where there's absent data. It's just data that was not specific to this study.
Right. So the data, the benefit from that is that we have a lot of individuals already tagged out there. So as soon as the array goes into the water, we will start detecting fish that have already been tagged. If that makes any sense.
So Michael, are you planning to look at the population of tags for this study specifically? You mentioned you're going to deploy 340 striped bass tags.
Yeah.
And they're going to be tagged through the work of the research vessel that you indicated earlier. And I thought you were also going to employ commercial fishing vessels to help you with the data collection for the tagging process. So I'm just a little confused because I'm hearing that, there are other tags out there, which I am aware of and you are aware of, but they're not specific to this study, which you framed out with specific quantities of tags that were going to be referenced. Mm-hmm. There is a big interest in the nearshore fishing community, as I'm sure you know, with striped bass. It's a $6 billion industry along the Atlantic coast, the striper coast. So this is something that's taken very seriously by both the recreational and commercial communities. This is the marquee game fish of our community. And I just want to make sure that your goals for this project are not impacted by, the construction schedule or an overall timeline. We missed the spring migration. Now, granted, there are resident fish that hang around the beaches, nearshore beach areas, most of the summer. Most of them are schoolie class fish. The bigger fish continue moving. The gray fish tag study shows some surprising information about striped bass migration that wasn't previously known, and was very interesting and very informative. But I think my understanding was this study was to be more site-specific, species-specific of fish that were possibly, tagged in this general area and then monitored for their subsequent movements, back and forth through these arrays, and also to include potential study and impact of key food chain species like sand eels, peanut bunker, spearing, that, as we know, are the underlying driving mechanism of the migration. Right now up in Peconic Bay, we're seeing lots of squid, we're seeing lots of spearing, we're seeing sand eels. And where you see those bait fish, you're finding the large majority of the marquee finfish of the area. So I just want to make sure that we're not diluting the objective of this study because of timeline?
Yeah, so with that, you know, if you know, if things go smoothly in the next couple of months, we should be deploying the receivers, and we'll have that much data up into the construction phase. And I don't know if there's any updates on the construction phase. I'll let Orsted answer that. And in terms of sorry, you had a lot of comments. I'm just trying to go through them one by one.
Yeah, well, just looking at the fish we tag, we want to have some data of their activities before we hit construction. And unless there's a new chart, there's really zero runway for that to take place.
Well, I don't know that there's zero, but I understand your point.
Well, it says that it's done, you know, which we're not, the timeline's already expired, if I'm reading it correctly.
No, from our timeline, construction starts in 2023.
Okay.
And
I was just,
our array will go in this summer in 2021.
Great.
And but to get to your point in terms of the tagging local fish, so most of these fish that we're talking about are going to be migrating along the coast. And so we are going to be tagging the fish here locally. And the numbers that I put on the first slide that showed the number of fish we're tagging for this study, those are the ones that we're tagging directly from this study. But all the other fish that we tag that go into this array are going to be positioned and included in the analysis. And in terms of what vessels we're using the Stony Brook University vessel, the Palmanock that I showed, and we're also using a vessel from Monmouth University to do tagging as well. The commercial vessels are being used on the Trawl Survey side. It's a little more difficult to do, to sort of set up the surgery tanks and all that, and honestly get approvals through animal protocol and various things like that to conduct this kind of research on a vessel that's not already set up to do it. And we will also be tagging off of a couple, potentially a couple smaller vessels that we have as well. I hope
chime in right here.
Yeah, I hope I addressed, Rick, I hope I addressed all your comments.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. It was very good. Thank you.
Hi, Mike. I have a question and a comment right along that same periphery there. So my friend Craig O'Connell with the OCES Foundation, he has the Montauk Shark Institute now. And we tag fish together. We do shark research together. And he's a PhD scientist with really great qualifications and a nice boat ready to go. If he wanted to tag, say, some thresher sharks, some juvenile great whites, or even like summer dogfish, I think that would be a good target too. Would you be able to perhaps contract him or provide tags for him to be able to take part?
Yeah, so if you could send me an email with some contact information, that would be great. But yes, so the sharks are a little bit different because we tag those on smaller vessels. We don't like to take the sharks out of the water and put them on the boat. We tag them, as that picture of my presentation showed, on the side of the vessel, which we feel is best for the animal and is a pretty good way of doing it. And so we actually do those off of smaller vessels, and we work with various people for tagging the sharks. We generally don't take any sharks, for instance, using research trawls. Well, one, you don't catch them, but we don't really want to bring the sharks up onto the vessel to tag. We want to tag them while they're still in the water.
I'll send you an email with his contact, and hopefully, this will contribute somewhat to a good end here. Thank you.
Yep.
Hey, Mike, there was one question that I don't think you hit on, was the bait fish.
Oh, yes.
How that's going to be collected and what type of study can be accomplished in that regard?
Yeah, so the bait fish, in terms of our particular study, we're not going to be tagging bait fish. The trawl survey will be capturing bait fish and should have some data on that, and that group's going to talk after us. And but you fish that small generally don't do so well with the tags. And you know, we've tagged river herring. I mean, there are some smaller size fish that we've tagged, but it's difficult, and you have to put a really short a tag that has a short life, because you have to get such a small tag. You know, for instance, the shark and sturgeon get 10-year tags, and you know, a winter flounder, something like that, gets a 2 to 3 year tag. And so the size of the fish limits how large a tag and how big a battery can be included in the tag. But the forage fish are important, and I don't disagree with you on that.
Thank you.
Hey, Mike.
Yes.
This is Melanie at Orset, and I actually had one clarifying question for you, and I'm sorry if you said this, but you know, my understanding is that because we're using acoustic receivers and tags that are all the same make, Vemco, I believe,
Yes.
is the name of that kind of means, right, that and this is a pretty standard tag that a lot of these acoustic telemetry groups besides you are out there using. So you could have a striped bass, I mean, hypothetically, right, down from the Chesapeake with a Vemco tag in it that could make its way all the way up to Long Island, but get detected by our receivers. Because it's like I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but I thought it was like a universal back and forth, talk to each other, all tags sort of get detected, right?
Yes, that's correct. And the researcher that tagged the fish does have the rights to that tag code, but we're involved in several cooperative networks where we share information, and there's very little disagreement over using other people's tags and reports. I would say sometimes in publications it can be a little you know, scientific peer review publications, it can be a little bit different and more difficult, but we are part of networks that share, and you know, we certainly will be collecting or detecting striped bass that are, for example, and sturgeon that are tagged by other researchers.
Hey, Mike, just back to the baitfish real quick. Did you say that someone else on the panel tonight was going to speak to that point, or did I misunderstand you there?
Yeah, so the trawl survey, they might be better able to address that question, and because they should be picking up some of those smaller bait fish.
Yeah, I didn't know if it's going to be an abundance study or year over year, you know, something that, you know, maybe complements the acoustic component.
It does complement the acoustics, and but they're going to give a presentation, so I'll let them go over.
No, sounds great. Thank you.
Hi, Michael. I have a very quick question, rather naive perhaps, but what would you expect the reaction of these various different species of fish to experience going through the EMF cable outreach? Is there any documentation on other construction of wind turbines that you have knowledge of?
Yeah.
That although the areas are different and the species may be different, is there a reaction that in general you would expect?
Yeah, Brad, do you want to add a little bit to that? Brad Peterson?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I can't hear you, Brad. Brad has to turn off his mute button.
Bradley, this is Mike from LTV. You are unmuted. Try to unmute that self one more time. Go ahead, Brad, if you want to try now.
How's that? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm
Thank you.
sorry. So Susan, what I was going to say is that much of the work that is being used to try to predict how animals are going to respond to this has been kind of done in a lab, you know, and so a lot of it is theoretical. And so the kind of the real world impact that these might have on these animals is kind of an unknown for many of these species. And that's why in the BOEM report, data gaps that needed to be addressed. And so I don't think that there's a great feel for, oh, hey, these guys are going to respond this way or there. Most people, I think, would say that the kind of like the skates, which are benthic and kind of nearest to them, might be more affected than maybe the fast moving pelagic species. But I would, my reading through the BOEM report is that there's not a consensus of how we would expect. And there's some kind of disagreement in perhaps how the animals might respond to this. And I think that the work that's gone off of Block Island, you know, that's kind of like people are looking to that to give some answers. But at this point, they haven't
Formulated any.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Oops. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
I'm wondering if this is a good segue into our next presentation on the Trawl Survey.
Sounds good.
Yeah, if Cornell's ready.
Yes, we're ready. All right, everyone can hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, good evening. My name is Scott Kiritello-Wagaman. I'm from Cornell Cooperative Extension of Suffolk County. Also representing Cornell tonight are Emerson Hasbrook and Dr. Matthew Sclafani for our Trawl project. Along with Matt Sclafani, Dr. Robert Serrato from Stony Brook, who's also working on the telemetry, will be working with us for the data analysis for the data we capture from the Trawl Survey. And I could share my screen, Mike.
Scott, could I ask you just to turn up your volume a little bit for us?
Is that any better?
Ooh,
Excuse me,
keep
Scott.
talking.
Okay.
Scott, you can go ahead and share your screen now.
Okay. Sorry, everyone can see this okay and can hear me better?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so this is just the introduction here, and we want to thank the trustees for allowing us this opportunity to share and discuss our portion of the project. So kind of as we all know, here's some maps of the area we're talking about, with the South Fork Wind Farm, the lease area to the left, and the graph map on the right showing the cable landing at Beach Lane in Wainscott. And as has already been kind of discussed, what makes this a good fit for Cornell is that this is a project that the fishermen, both commercial and the recreational, brought to the town trustees. And then the town trustees in turn came to Cornell Cooperative Extension due to our history of successful collaboration with fishermen on cooperative research projects, both in New York and kind of up and down New England and the mid-Atlantic coast here. So yeah, the background, we kind of already went into it. It was initially different iterations of what could be done. And while, there was talk of the BRUVs, what we kind of settled on to complement the telemetry side of it was a trawl survey along the inshore area. So we were able to identify a commercial fishing vessel on which to perform the trawl survey. We are now using the FV Bulldog, on which we're going to be doing the trawl survey. And again, most of the stuff we're doing, since we've been working with that smaller subject area experts, we've kind of tried to complement each other on the work we're doing. So just as Dr. Frisk just presented, you know, the goal here is to kind of get 2 years pre-construction and export cable layout, 1 year of, you know, while that's being constructed, and then 2 year post construction. So through that, we're going to be we've identified 2 areas in which we will do the trawl survey. The trawl survey we're using is one that's been used by the NEMAP, the Northeast Area Monitoring and Assessment Program. So this is already a method that's being used along the East Coast. This way we can kind of have results that we can compare to. So along that line, you can kind of see, you know, the trawl there. It's nearly identical to the NMFS trawl survey, except for the modified sweep, in which we'll have it's 3 inches off the bottom for our net that we'll be using. And again, all this is the same procedures and protocols that have already been done through other trawl surveys. So it's, you know, a standard 20 minutes, you know, hauling at 3 knots. So the way we've kind of designed this is to get 5 survey days each season. So winter, spring, summer, and fall, which with 30 to 40 tows per season, equally split between the 2 areas. So those are kind of the 2 areas we have here. You'll see the star highlighting where Beach Lane is in Wainscott. So we have the impact area there, and then also a reference area to the west. So each of those grids is a 1.5 by 1.5 nautical mile square. So when we do these days at sea, you know, over the 5-day course, if we're doing 40 tows, there'll be 20 in the impact area, 20 in the research area that we'll have to compare to. This area is designed so that it goes past the 3 nautical mile area, mostly so that we can kind of see, while we don't know for sure the exact layout of the cable, in all the previous, I can go back, descriptions, you'll see kind of just past that 3 nautical miles where that export cable kind of heads perpendicular into shore. So we want to be able to make sure that when we're randomly choosing some tows, that we're getting some areas in which we're seeing whether or not there's going to be any movement offshore, and then likewise any movement of fish migrations back inshore as they get back towards Montauk. So for the tows, you will be collecting some survey and environmental data collection. Again, standard for all the trawl surveys. Additionally, on request of the trustees, we'll be doing a conductivity depth and temperature profile so that we can kind of get a vertical profile of the water column. So as we work each of these tows, we'll be using the National Marine Fisheries Sea Monitoring Program and the Observer Program to work up the catch. So once the net is brought back on, we start separating them by species. Lengths will be taken on individuals, and weights as well. We can do that by using a tote system. If we're inundated by certain species, you know, we're expecting to catch a lot of, you know, skates and dogfish depending on the season. The extent of the permit, which is a letter of authorization we're getting here, the vessel will be permitted to land any fish caught as long as it's within the DEC current regulations at the time. So for the data analysis, again, being handled by Matt Stefani and Bob Strato, has been designed, I guess, to as a backy design. So it's a before-after control impact. So they're going to be using two different techniques, but kind of again, as Dr. Frisk and the Stony Brook team presented, that what we're looking at here is to see if the distribution of fish species over the course of the 5 years, whether or not it's impacted by either the construction or any of the EMF that may be coming from the connecting cable, post construction. So the data analysis is going to be two different multivariable techniques: the community trajectory analysis and a redundancy analysis. So by comparing the community structure between the control and impact areas over time, we kind of see if there's any difference going on between that impact and the reference area. And then the redundancy analysis will be able to see if there's any important environmental factors that are going to be associated with this change. Part of the our involvement with this at Suffolk is that, again, we've traditionally been, we've worked with the industry to solve these problems. So this particular project and effort allows us to use, the fishermen, the commercial fishing industry in particular here, to get them involved in the process. And then as a lot more of these studies for either this program or this wind energy farm or other ones come online, it allows this to be used as kind of a platform for future commercial fishing partnerships and collaborations to get involved with what's going on as these lease areas get developed. And this is our kind of ballpark timeline here. Again, as Stony Brook presented, we're hoping to get out there within the month. Contracts are only just recently signed, so there's been a lot of pre-work, getting things set up with the boat, getting the nets made for the NEMAP net, and just mobilizing everything so we can get ready as soon as we're possible. So that was kind of the quick and dirty, because again, a lot of this, the background to this was already kind of covered by John Aldred and also Stony Brook. This is the trawl side of it, and I'll welcome any questions. Thank you.
Scott, this is John. I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit on how you're going to evaluate the smaller species. My understanding is you'll be using small mesh net inserts. And do those inserts, will they be used only to look for small species, or will they be in use the entire survey?
The net being used has a 1-inch liner inside. And again, that's just so that this survey can be comparable and usable to the NEMAP surveys. So to the point about, the bait fish that was brought up in the previous discussion, I don't know that, anything basically smaller than that inch will get through. So certainly, anything that we catching, we are cataloging and making note of.
Scott, can I add something here?
Yes. Thank you.
So yes, we're going to have the 1-inch liner in the net, which will catch, a lot of some of the other species that we're talking about. But we also have to balance in the net design the flow of water, if you will, through the net. You can't go much smaller than that 1-inch liner, because then you start to build back pressure within the net that the fish will sense as they come into the net or even in front of the net. So that would decrease the efficiency of capture of the net. So you need to strike a balance between the two.
Hey, Scott and Emerson, this is Rick. How you doing? Thank you very much for presenting, Scott. It was great. Earlier this evening, I think it was acknowledged that, we do have some unknowns still on Emf impacts. And it was stated that it looks like from the literature study, and I think other data that's out there, bottom dwellers like skates and very likely sand eels, could be impacted by EMFs. I think if you speak to any seasoned bayman or any diehard surfcaster, they're going to tell you that the sand eel migration drives fall fishing on the South Fork of Long Island. And the years when sand eels don't come near shore, we experience very poor fishing along the South Shore beaches. So I understand the constraints of gear and methodology, and they're very well stated and acknowledged by myself. But I do think to not include a very key species like sand eels that, as I said, I think is widely acknowledged as the big driver of the migration, could leave us with a hole in the study, so to speak. So I'm hopeful that you guys can come up with some way to consider some of the smaller species as part of this, even if it's not quite there yet. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's certainly, it did come up during some of that back and forth with the subject matter experts and what kind of studies we could do. And I don't recall how we finally came up with the, as far as the trawl and the telemetry being the final two that would come out of this, but it's certainly something that we can kind of pursue further on how best to address that.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, this is John again, Scott. When do you anticipate your first survey?
We're hoping, a month from now, but there's still some, the same thing that Stony Brook and, Dr. Frisk mentioned is that, we've ordered a lot of gear come through. We still have some vessel requirements that need to be taken care of. So we're hoping to try to get a spring survey in. We're proceeding with that intention.
If I could just quickly speak to a point made a moment ago by Rick Drew. It's my expectation, based on my experience on the Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries trawl surveys inshore, where we used a similar small mesh cod end liner. That net was able to sample effectively for sand eels and fish that were down to about 4 or 5 centimeters in length. So it's my expectation that with the trawl net that's being used for this survey with the NEOMAP style trawl net, we will be able to sample for a lot of those smaller forage species. And I think the net in particular would be able to sample pretty effectively for sand eels.
Right, thank you, Greg. Look forward to hearing about that in the future if you guys get some data on that point. Can I ask one other question if no one else has anything? There was talk about spatial distribution and community structure impacts. Was that based on geographic location as one and species distribution or species structure on the other? I wasn't really clear on the H1, H2. Are those two different hypotheses? And could they just be elaborated on a little bit so everyone understands exactly what they were?
So the hypotheses were just similar to what Stern looked at. But this would be part of the data analysis that Matt Stefani and Bob Serrato developed. I'm not sure if either of them are available to speak specifically to this.
Yeah, Scott, maybe I can I can help out. I don't know if Bob is still on. I know Matt was calling in from the field.
Right.
But I mean, both of those are related, but they're two different ways of looking at the data. One is, what's the spatial distribution of the species along the south shore of East Hampton? Does that spatial distribution change? For instance, do fish react and tend to go further offshore? If they do go further offshore and then try to come back inshore, do they not do that because of what's happening with EMF from the cable? Right? We don't know that. That's what we're going to find out. So those are some of the things about spatial distribution. And that gets, I think, to one of the primary questions the trustees had is how will this affect the migration of fish along the south shore of East Hampton? The other part of it is, will the community structure of species be impacted? And as was pointed out in the previous presentation, some species may be impacted more by EMF and others less so by EMF. So community structure, is the what are the various types of what are the various species that we find along the south shore of East Hampton through the seasons, and does that distribution of species change with the installation of the cable system? You want to have a more diverse and robust distribution of species through the year, which typically happens. But if some species are more affected than others, then that could reduce the numbers of species, not so much the numbers of individuals, but the numbers of species that are along the south shore of East Hampton. I hope that helps.
That was great, Emerson. Thank you. Just what I was looking for. Thanks.
Can I ask our subject matter experts, I don't know if it's Mike or Emerson or maybe a collective, early on when we were having group discussions about these studies, right? These two studies, we were talking a little bit too about how the two studies, kind of marry up with each other, and that together it really provides a really nice, robust data set. I don't know if you guys, if somebody could maybe comment a little bit on that. We've presented these two things as separate efforts, but they really, we do hope to view both almost as one data set and one analysis and try to get out of that, really good inferences. But so I think there's some value there. And I didn't know if maybe somebody could just comment on that.
Yeah, I can comment if nobody else is going to jump in. Sure. Yes, it makes sense to look at the data from both of these studies and see how they relate to each other. And that's one of the reasons why we have Bob Serrato from the Stony Brook group doing the data analysis for us on the Trawl Survey. He's involved in the telemetry study as well and the data analysis on that part of it. So there'll be some linkages there, I guess.
so the studies have, somewhat different spatial and temporal resolutions. And so by having the Trawl Survey covering a large area, but doing it seasonally, and then the Acoustic Telemetry covering a somewhat smaller area, but more continuously, I think that they do complement one another. And we're hoping that, if one of the two studies misses some important element, that the other study picks up the slack and can actually address that element. So I don't think that they were conceived at all in as being two separate studies, but as the discussions developed the plan, we could see the benefit of doing both of them at the same time.
I have a question, if we're ready for somebody else to ask a question. So I'm hoping you're reading me. Somebody acknowledge?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great.
Yes, you're on.
Thank you. So on the Trawl Survey schedule, I'm wondering if there's any control for the lunar cycle. And will your tows be made like on relative days of the lunar cycle in following years? Could the weather provide? And if your tows will be made fair tide or against tide, is that type of stuff you guys are considering as well? Just a question.
Yeah, it's not something we did consider. I'd have to think about that more, but it would have been another, round of possible variables that we'd have to plan for.
Okay, that's enough. I just wanted to throw it out there. Thank you.
I mean, in designing this, and again, keeping with the NEMAP protocols, we were towing from essentially sunrise to sunset. So as long as we set in as the sun's setting, and that last tow we get on board, as the sun goes down, it's considered, 1 day.
The sunrise tow 3 days before the moon will be completely different than the sunrise tow 3 days after. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, you're probably right, Mike. But what we also tend to do is try to randomize for all of these different variables that may affect catch. So through the course of the study, we are likely to go through all the different moon phases, but you don't want to plan on having everything on a specific moon phase, because then your data can be influenced by that. You want to randomize for that so that it isn't influenced. The same with tide. In fact, we choose our tows through just called a random number generator in a way. All of those cells that Scott showed before, we don't go to the same cells each time we go out. We randomize that to pick which cells we're going to tow in. And then we also randomize even our tow direction. And again, that's to try to minimize any influence that these effects might have. It just makes the data analysis cleaner.
I guess. Go ahead, John. Go ahead.
I assume that this is also the way the other surveys that you're going to try to coordinate your work with operate on a randomized kind of a schedule.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
So your comparisons would have to be random to random as opposed to random to targeted, I would assume.
Not 100% sure on that.
I'm just
But yeah, it's
saying if National Marine Fisheries Service does randomized tows relative to tide cycles and lunar cycles, and you went and didn't, then it'd be much harder to coordinate the two data sets.
right. Okay, I get you now. Yes, they do it randomized.
Yeah, and John, that is my understanding that we keep using that word NEMAP, which is an acronym. And that is like a standardized protocol that other adjacent trawl surveys are executing on. And exactly what you're saying is right. They do like a randomized I don't know if it's stratified, but they do a randomized design just like that too. So you can kind of take this data set and put it right next to those other data sets, and they're comparable because you're doing that standardized practice and you're employing that protocol.
Thanks.
So, John, Francis, we've come to, I think, the conclusion of our portion. Sounds like we had a lot of good Q&A there. I don't know if there's any further questions, but I don't know if you guys are good.
Well, thanks, Melanie.
Let's see if anybody else is called in with questions. Mike, do we have any callers?
There is one caller on the phone. I can unmute them and see. The last 4 digits of this caller's phone number are 4008. I'll unmute that now.
Yes, I'm just from Cornell Cooperative Extension. No question.
Okay, thank you. All right, any trustees have any more questions? Looks like you've covered everything.
I just to thank everybody that came to our meeting tonight and explained the various aspects of the study and gave us and gave the community a much better understanding of how this is going to unfold over the next few years.
Yes, thanks, everybody.
Is it possible to have copies of the slide presentation so that we can keep abreast of what the schedule looks like as time goes on? I think those were very helpful to me, and I think they would be helpful to the trustees to keep on file so that we can refer to them. Is that possible to email it to Arlene?
Sure, we can do that. We will pass these along to Arlene.
All right, thank you so much. It was very informative for me and a lot of information, but certainly a very fascinating project that you were about to commence on. And I thank you all for doing this, especially to John Aldred for all of your behind the scenes work on this. I know it's been a very involved effort. So thank you very much, John, on behalf of all the trustees.
And thank you to all the trustees for your support.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you, everyone. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you for listening to us.
Hey, good night. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Hi, guys. Hi, gals. Good night.
Okay, so quickly, in my rush to get to that presentation, I neglected to ask Arlene to do roll call. So I think we'll move into that.
Interject quickly. I'll just act, I'm gonna drop off after this segment, but we do have until June 4th to file written comments. If there's anything that came up tonight that you feel like we need to correct or you want to comment on further, we have a little bit of time to do so, but please let me know if there's anything that you want me to follow up on.
Thank you, Mila.
Thank you.
Good to see you. too.
Yep. Thank you guys. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Mila.
No.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll do the roll call. John Aldred,
Here.
Francis Bach,
Here.
Ken Dollinger,
Here.
Rick Drew,
Here.
Tim Garneau,
Here.
Jim Grimes,
Yes.
Mike Martinson,
Here.
Susan McGraw-Keever,
Here.
and William Taylor.
Here.
I thank you all. Okay.
Okay. Excuse me. All right, next on public comment, I see we have Rick Whalen representing Cynthia Crane, owner of 864 Springs Fireplace Road, who's looking to legalize her dock replacement expansion. Rick?
Hello, Francis. Hello, all.
How are you?
Good night. Good evening. So anyway, thank you for having me tonight. This concerns obviously the Crane dock, and there's been a lot of at 864 Springs Fireplace Road, and there's been quite a bit of confusion about this dock. So I would like to be able to clarify it all for you tonight. First of all, I just want to establish the dock was a legally permitted dock. It was approved by the trustees in 1984. The trustees issued an annual permit for this dock for some 36 years. My client bought the property in February of 2020. And in fact, shortly thereafter, the trustees sent her a dock renewal permit application, which she then submitted. That was in the spring of last year. Before she bought the property, obviously we knew the property was coming with a dock, so we looked into it. Basically what we did is we just checked to make sure that there was a valid trustee permit for the dock, and there was. We didn't foil the trustee records. We were not aware at that time that there was a discrepancy about the size of the float. We didn't delve any further. We figured, there's a dock. It's been here for a long time. The trustees say it's got an active permit. We figured that was the end of it. It wasn't until the spring of last year when my client had some work done on the dock by First Coastal that all of a sudden it became kind of an issue. And I will later on I will discuss the work that was done to that dock, to the dock, for which a trustee permit should have been obtained. But I will explain the work done was not that extensive. So we honestly thought the dock was actually, once the issue then arose and we started to look into it, we foiled the trustee records. And at least initially, we thought that we had no evidence that it was anything other than 8 foot by 10 foot in size. In fact, I wrote a letter to you in November of last year. And at that time, I was still under the impression that the dock was 8 by 10 as originally approved. Then we got additional trustee records, and it became clear that in 1984, the original owner of the property was the first person to build a house on the property, a fellow named Alfred Stewart. His application was for a 4 foot by 10 foot float. So it's conceded that the float as originally approved by the trustees was 4 foot by 10 foot. But I want you to understand, we didn't know that, nor did my client make the change. That change in the size of the float was apparently made 20 or more years ago. The dock was not rebuilt in the spring of 2020. I will detail the changes in a moment. I want to make it clear, by the way, there are no town zoning violations regarding this dock, none. The owner has never been cited by the town. There is an April 2021 letter from the planning department, which apparently you saw and was circulated. That letter is full of errors, and I'll just go down them very quickly here. First of all, the most amazing statement in that memo or that letter is that the planning director states that an NRSP is not required if an applicant is doing work on property that the applicant doesn't own. And all I'm going to say about that, for those of you who know, on a text with the word, what the acronym SMH stands for, SMH. That's all I have to say on that. The dock, they said the dock wasn't part of the 1981 permit. Before the modern zoning code, it was required if you did construction work on on a property that contained wetlands, you needed a special permit from the zoning board. This is late 1970s, early 80s. As far as I know, such a special permit was not required for docks, but I haven't delved too deeply into the old zoning ordinance. And anyway, planning department letter says that there was no permit for the dock issued in 1981. This is true. The dock was not installed until 1984. It wasn't part of the original house construction. As I said, I don't know that a special permit was required for docks. What the owner of the land did at the time, that was Alfred Stewart. He applied to the trustees. He got a trustee permit. Town Natural Resources Director, Larry Penny, was actually involved in that. Larry Penny was advising the trustees and wrote a memo to the trustees about the dock 3 days before the trustees issued the permit. The planning department letter says that pedestrian access is not authorized within the scenic easement. And I think by implication, they also thought maybe the reserved area. So I have a couple of comments about that. First of all, the planning department didn't read the scenic easement. The scenic easement from 1978 has no prohibition against clearing whatsoever. And lest you think that was a mistake, it's important to understand in 1978, this land, the property all the way down to the marsh, was a mowed field. This was part of the original, some of the Springs Talmadge family's farmland. So it was completely clear. There is no limitation in the scenic easement against clearing. There's limitation on structures, but not clearing. As far as crossing through the town parkland that adjoins where the ramp to the dock is, it's town parkland. There's no prohibition against anyone going across it. If my client or one of her family members or a friend walks over that town parkland, it's not trespassing. There's no prohibition whatsoever against walking through the town land. Now, if we had a structure on the town property, that might be a different matter. But we've had surveys done by two different surveyors, Saskis and a fellow named Robert Fox, and both of them, multiple surveys, in Saskis' case, multiple surveys, show that the ramp for the dock, which is the landmost part of the ramp to the catwalk, which is the landmost part of the structure, is below the mean high water mark. And if it's below mean high water, then, and it's adjoining the trustee body of water, who does that land belong to? It should belong to the trustees. So we don't believe any part of the structure whatsoever is on town land. That's my response to that. So, the planning department letter was just, it was poorly crafted, and they really didn't do their research or their homework. The dock as approved, there's also been a question about whether the dock as originally approved had a catwalk. And I have two things to say about that. First of all, Alfred Stewart's original application in 1984, he had a hand-drawn sketch, and the sketch shows a catwalk or a vertical structure going from the horizontal dock to the shore. So it wasn't stated in words, but it was shown on the plan. Secondly, and more importantly, Larry Penny, in the memo that the trustees relied upon, and this is a memo if you're looking for it, it's dated June 10th, 1984, Larry specifically says that the dock should have a catwalk. He says 2.5 feet by 20 feet, that it should have a catwalk. That's how you would get to the dock. I don't know how else one would get from the shore to the dock. And as far as we can tell, the dock has always had a catwalk. Certainly did since aerial photographs in 2001. So now let me talk about the work that was done to the dock last spring. So when my client bought the property and we closed in February of 2020, the dock was still in the water, most parts of it. The floating dock and the catwalk, at least, were in the water. The prior owner had not removed them. So in the spring of last year, my client contacted First Coastal and asked them to look at it. There were some, the catwalk itself had aluminum decking that was in very poor shape. Parts of it were missing. It was, not very stable. So she asked First Coastal to look at it and to make whatever repairs were necessary. The big mistake is they should have gone to the trustees and they should have gotten trustee permit to do that work. And, I want to say that, acknowledge that right out. And I apologize that they didn't go ahead and do that. But just so you know, there are basically 4 components to the dock. There's a ramp that goes from the shore, which I believe is actually in your land. It's from the the shore side of the marsh to the catwalk. That ramp is unchanged. That's the original ramp. It's an aluminum ramp with like low railings. That's the original device that came with the property. Next is the catwalk. And the catwalk, there were changes made to the catwalk. The catwalk originally was an aluminum frame with aluminum decking, and there were galvanized steel pipes that it was attached to that were mounted to the bottom. So the framing is actually still there. The original aluminum framing is there, but the decking was replaced with cedar planks. Same width, didn't widen the catwalk at all. And probably more importantly, they did swap out the galvanized pipes for 4x4 tropical hardwood untreated. And that does go into the bottom. And clearly, that should have obtained, trustee approval should have been obtained for that work. There's then a ramp from the end of the catwalk to the dock. The original ramp was not usable. I understand it was in deteriorated shape, so the owner did buy a new ramp from First Coastal. That's a cedar ramp, cedar planking. Doesn't even touch the water. It just goes from the ramp, from the seaward end of the catwalk to the float. And finally, the float itself, again, there seems to be some confusion about that. I have been told by both my client and by Billy Mack at First Coastal that the float that you see today is the original float. That's the float, when I say original, that's the float that was on the property when my client bought the property. And as near as we can tell, it's probably the same float that's been there since at least 2001. So it's the same float. It is larger than was originally approved by the trustees in 1984, and I'll discuss that next. So when we bought the property, we didn't originally check on this side. We just checked to see there was a valid permit. Later on, we did foil the trustee records as this thing became an issue. And eventually what we found is that the original permit for the dock in 1984 specified the applicant had asked for a 4-foot by 10-foot float. Okay, that is what the trustees approved. It's not what is there today. And I do want to emphasize that's not my client's fault. For at least the last 20 years, it appears that the float has been 8-foot by 10-foot. So someone changed it somewhere before 2001. We would like to keep the float. I mean, we would like to keep the 8 by 10-foot float. A couple, practical reasons here. First of all, a 4-foot by 10-foot float, and I don't pretend to be an expert on floating docks, but it seems to me that would be kind of unstable. Also, the ramp that goes from the catwalk to the float, it has rollers on the float end, and at a very high or very low tide, that thing, will very high tide, I guess, it could roll right off the float if it's only 4 foot wide, and then it's going to get damaged the next tide change. I just want to say one thing. I did submit with my letter to you. I gave you guys like a Google oblique aerial to kind of show the perspective of this dock with relation to that arm of Accabonac Harbor. Accabonac Harbor, according to the town IT department, is about 297 acres in size. That's the bottom line. The Suffolk County Real Property says it's 320 acres. Let's say Accabonac is 300 acres, and that nice round number. That is, and you can do the calculations, that's about 13 million square feet of bottomland. 13 million square feet of bottomland. The float in question as it is right now at 8 by 10 is 80 square feet, and the catwalk's even less. So we obviously would not like to have to buy a new float. As I said, we're concerned about the stability of it if it were narrower. But, that's ultimately your choice. I do want to point out, again, this is something that was originally installed with trustee approval. We bought it knowing that there was a trustee permit. We did not delve far enough into the records to know the size of it. But in any event, the float, when my client bought the property, was the float that's there right now. So I hope that clarifies some of the misconceptions about this. I imagine you probably have some questions for me, so I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Yeah, Rick, this is Rick Drew. How you doing? Thanks for the update. I just want to clarify a couple of the points you made. One is you stated that the application for the dock contained a sketch.
Yes.
And that the recommendation from Mr. Penny was that it should have a catwalk.
Correct, yes.
But what came out of that process was a permit for a 4 by 10 floating dock. So I don't see how those two original comments in any way constitute a permit. They constitute a request, which ended up with something that was much different. And that same permit has been issued for many years. So my understanding of this is that it's a permit for a floating dock. And many floating docks exist in our community, and they are accessed either by swimming or by a dinghy or another small craft. So they are used and they are very common. So I don't see the correlation of those 3 points. I see there was an application and a permit that are different. So that's my understanding of what you just surmised for us.
Well, 2 comments on that, Rick. Number one, I don't want to derogate the trustee records, but they're not super clear. If you go back through them, there are a lot of references in the records to a 10-foot dock, period. That's all they talk about. My assumption is that in 1984, the trustees understood that there was a catwalk going with the dock, but we don't, the trustee records are very cryptic. That's all I'll say. They're very cryptic.
Right. Well, I'm only reiterating what you said tonight. I'm not getting into other records. And if there are other records we should look at, that's great. But again, I'm just reiterating what you said to me. And I can't accept those first 2 points as being components of the permit because they were not included in the permit. That's where I'm getting hung up on. If you can help me with it.
Okay, well, Rick, I have to go back and look. I don't know that we have a permit. We have the permit application. I think we have minutes of the trustee approval. We have Larry Penny's memo, which it did appear that the trustees were relying upon. But I think after that, what you have is an annual dock permit. And I believe that the permit refers to a 10-foot like a 10-foot dock. I think that's as much as it says, 10-foot dock. So it's not completely clear that the trustees there's certainly nothing saying that we denied the catwalk. It's not clear. Let me just say one other thing, and I think this is very important. When you go back for the last 20 years, I mean, and we only know this, my client didn't own the property until 2020. If you look at the aerial photographs in 2001 to 2020, every winter the dock was taken out of the water, every winter until the winter that my client bought it, along with the other components of the dock, and you keep seeing them in aerial photographs on land. The bottom line is there's no doubt, Rick, there is no doubt that from 2001 to 2020, this dock had a catwalk. The trustees issued a permit to the prior owner every one of those years for at least 19 years. So does the trustees have any responsibility here that you're issuing a permit every year? I mean, if there was something wrong about it, if there shouldn't have been a catwalk or if the dock was too large, why we issued a permit? We relied upon the fact there was a permit issue. We honestly didn't look any deeper. Hey, in the future, every time if I ever have a client who's buying property with a trustee dock, I'm going to foil your entire file beforehand. But I didn't think to do that. We checked to see if there's a trustee dock permit. It's a dock permit. I assume, therefore, that what's there is legal. For 20 years, we know that the dock was 8 by 10 and there was a catwalk to it. And you guys issued a permit every year.
Rick, I have a question for you. The past spring, after your client purchased the property, did they apply for a permit to the trustees to do any work on the dock?
No.
Because I believe there was construction done on the dock.
In the spring
spring.
Last spring of 2020. So what happened was.
And let me just also preface by saying I know that when you were describing the dock now, that and you agree that the purchaser should have requested a permit to install the 4x4 wood piers instead of when they remove the galvanized structures. But the buyer did not come to us for a permit for that. Is that correct?
Right. As I said, I think that my client should have gone to the trustees. She went to First Coastal. Neither she nor First Coastal, and you can argue about who deserves the blame. Ultimately, the client is the property owner. Someone should have made an application to the trustees last spring, right, at the very least for the replacing the pilings.
Okay. Who represented her when she purchased the property?
I did.
Okay. All right. So at the time when she purchased the property, I believe you would have seen or wanted to know if she had, if there had been a permit for the piers to be removed and the wood piers to be put in. I'm grappling with this concept because even with Larry Penny, as much as I loved him and he was terrific, and a statement suggesting that the property have what he was suggesting for it does not, that's just a suggestion by Larry Penny. I have a problem with, because as a real estate broker and you as an attorney, you know that we have to get permits. A buyer has to get permits, or a homeowner, to construct anything, especially on the water. So I'm having a difficult time with this particular application because I believe that it is incumbent upon the purchaser to do their due diligence through their attorney and to make sure that if they do any further work after purchasing a property, they know that they have to get permits. They can't just, especially on the water. I mean, they were fully aware, I'm assuming, that there is a need for a building permit. And I'm sure that the building department would have advised the buyer or the new homeowner that they would be subject to the trustees also providing a permit to do that work.
All right, well, there's a lot of stuff there, Susan. Let me hit it all. I represent the applicant when she bought the property. That was in February 2020. That's when she did not consult with me before she did the repair work to the dock. All right. Had she asked me, I would have said, well, I think you need a permit for that. All right. Or we would have looked into the nature of the work to be done. So I was not involved in the repair work to the dock.
Okay.
She went to a contractor and they went and they just did the work. You don't get a building permit necessarily. The work that was done, I'm not sure would have required a building permit. So no one was going to the building department. And believe me, I'm not sure the building department would necessarily have said, oh, you need to go see the trustees. That's something we should have known on our own. But again, the client did this repair work to the dock in the spring of 2020, which was about 2 or 3 months after the closing. I was not consulted about that.
Okay, all right. So that aside, though, the purchaser, the new homeowner, certainly knows that they cannot just simply go on the waterways and do work or enlarge the dock as it is.
They did
I have seen pictures of the former residence aerial view of the dock that was originally there. It's considerably smaller than the one that is there now.
Susan, that's not true. Susan, that is not true. The catwalk is the same length.
Well, the original one was 4 by 10. That was the original float permit.
The dock that was on the property when my client bought the property.
Right, had already been enlarged to the larger size.
Correct.
I understand.
We have never enlarged that. It has not been enlarged.
Okay, but what has changed in the spring was the removal of the galvanized poles for the dock. And the 4x4s were installed.
The catwalk. The float itself is still connected to galvanized pipes, 2 of which broke away in last winter. So the float itself is still connected or attached by galvanized pipes to the bottom. The pipes that were replaced were those supporting the catwalk.
Okay, and the catwalk was already in existence when the purchaser obtained the house.
Yes, in fact,
on the house.
Still in the water. In February of 2020, the prior owner never removed it.
And Rick, you're saying it's the same exact size?
Yes, same length, same width. Exactly what I'm saying.
Thank you.
Is the catwalk actually on Trustee Bottom, or is that on residential land, or what?
Trustee Bottom. It's in Trustee Bottom. It's on the bottom. It's in Ecological Harbor.
Yeah.
And the original permit that was issued by the trustees back in 1984 did not have a catwalk in that permit. Is that correct?
Again, I'm not sure. I have to go back. I'm not sure there's an actual permit per se. They sign an annual permit afterwards. But in other words, I don't think there's a trustee resolution. You look for like a permit or resolution. I have to go back. I don't recall it being that specific. So it's not like today you'd look and say, oh, let me see the original permit and let's see the size of it. The trustees then record it later on in their records, like in the annual payments they would record, and it was done in 2 different ways, either 4-foot by 10-foot dock, or other times there was a notation just saying 10-foot dock. It was very vague, very, very cryptic. None of which we knew when we bought the property, because We looked to see if there was a trustee dock permit. There was, and maybe stupidly, but we assumed that the permit was for the dock that was on the property.
Rick, at no time was there ever a fee charged for the catwalk. And there is a fee structure for that.
I don't know how you guys were issuing the permit fee did change over time. I do know that. The fee schedule that I've seen from your records does not specify how it was calculated, so I don't know. Honestly, what it seems like happened, really, is that no one was probably checking it. It doesn't look like there were inspections going on to see, what the size of the dock were or whether it had a catwalk. But I don't know how they calculated the annual charges.
I do know that the charges were by the linear foot of the dock.
Right, but I can't tell from the, from the records, I can't tell, what the formula they were using, whether they were including the catwalk or not. The original permit was, I think, like $25 a year. I'd have to go back into my files, and then it did go up at least once or twice. It changed over time. All of it, obviously, when the prior. There were only two prior owners. The original person who built the dock was Alfred Stewart, and I think he sold the property in 1999 to Linda LaPlante, and LaPlante sold to my client.
Normally, Rick, there would be a fee for each piling installed, and there's no records of those either.
No, it's just I'll go check and see what I have here. Just like there's a flat fee each year.
I believe $75 is the minimum dock fee. I think that's what's always been charged on that dock, is the minimum fee. And to me, that would work with it being a 4x10 dock only.
$15 was being charged. Looks like from 88 to 2005. It just says paid $88. It doesn't. It says 10 foot in your ledger book. This is from 1988, and we have the first few years were done separately. From 1980 to 2008, the ledger book says 10-foot dock, and then it contains annual payments of $15 to 2005. And I can't tell what they did in 06. So it looks like maybe in 06 and 07, there was no fee paid, and the owner may have made up for it in 2008. And they say 2009 to present. Then there was a ledger from 2009 to present. That says 4 foot by 10 foot floating dock. And the amount paid was, looks like $50 a year starting in 2010, and then $75 a year starting in 2018. Was paid right through June of 2019. And I know there's something around here on the first few payments.
So in 2010, the dock was 4x10?
Go back here.
Just making notes here.
Your ledger, there's a ledger that said Linda LaPlante, 864 Springs Fireplace Road, reference number 52, 4 foot by 10 foot floating dock. Remember, that's the trustee's own ledger book. That's not something that, we got it eventually through foiling it, but not something that's just like, publicly available information.
Well, I always have a problem when people come in and after the fact, and they've built it, and then they come back and they say, "Oh, made a mistake."
We didn't build it by mistake. We did.
No, but she did. The buyer did work this past spring, and it seems that there's oftentimes a retroactive response to something after the fact that it's been built. And I know that because I've been, real estate for 25, 30 years or whatever it is, and it happens often. So I'd like to see people actually come in and apply properly to obtain the work that they wish to have done, instead of doing it and then getting caught with a mistake and coming back. So I'm almost,
Susan,
I'm not sure that I want to say she should come back in with a proper application to the trustees and ask us for the doc that she has and the work that she has had done.
Susan, let me say this.
And there's no discrepancy about whether or not, the permit was valid or not valid, or the work that was done was properly done. It's almost like there's always this forgiveness section in things that get done out here on the East End, and a lot of it is just looking the other way.
The work that was done primarily comes down to the following. The pilings that supported the catwalk were replaced. They went from galvanized pipe to tropical hardwood posts. And the planking on the decking, I have photographs, at least 1 or 2 photographs of the original catwalk top. The planking on the catwalk was shot. Part of it was missing. These were safety improvements. I totally agree. The safe thing and the correct thing to do would have been to go to the trustees and get prior approval. But these were basically safety improvements to the catwalk. The catwalk.
Okay, that's great that there's safety improvements, but everything that's done on the bottomlands that require trustee approval and permits should be brought to us. It's, safety improvements, that's great. I'm sure we would all be in favor of safety improvements. But we also require that people come to us for permits.
We haven't established that the catwalk was even permitted. I mean, that seems to be a very large question here. I mean, there's never been a charge for any part of that structure. The permit only describes a 4x10 foot dock. Do you agree that there's also a letter in the file from Larry Penny stating that there should not be a dock in that area?
No, I'm not aware of that, of any such letter.
Okay.
No,
my understanding that there is.
If there is, then I'm going to be very disappointed because we didn't get your whole file then. We issued a FOIL request and we got FOILs in 2 different sets of documents. I've never seen let me see if I can find Larry's memo. The only memo I know from Larry, there's only one. And it's the June 10th, 1984 memo. If there's another member out there and we weren't provided with this, I will not be very happy. June 10th, 1984. There was to be a mooring offshore for Mr. Stewart's sailboat. A small 2.5 foot by 20 foot long catwalk the word should is missing, constructed over the marsh to protect the marsh from despoilation by foot traffic, and a 10 foot by 4 foot floating dock adjunct to the catwalk or anchored seasonally with galvanized pipe pilings that are easily installed and easily removed, which is what was done, be placed alongshore in a small natural cove at the edge of the Stewart property to surface a dinghy and other small boats. That was his recommendation. There's nothing in Larry's memo suggesting that the dock was inappropriate. That's the memo. And my personal guess, and I knew a lot of the players and the trustees at the time. It was written to Arthur Roth. I knew Arthur Roth. I knew Betty Frenet. My guess is they relied on Larry. And if he said, do this, that's what they probably did. Or that's what they meant to do. Whether they recorded it properly in their records, that's another matter.
Okay, Rick, I'm reading the...
That's one interpretation. That's one interpretation. When I was made aware of the Larry's memo and the way the permit was written and the fact that there's a reserve area in between the property owner land and the harbor, I didn't think that it would be unreasonable to think that the trustees may have been aware of that at the time and understood that a catwalk may not have been able to be landed on property other than the property owner's own property. And that may be why they only gave a 4x10 floating dock. I mean, I have no idea either, but we're both trying to interpret things here,
right?
That nobody knows.
I agree.
Hey, Rick.
I mean, my feeling is we've got a lot of issues here that we should be exploring with our own lawyer. Because, I mean, I think your main point here is if we've overlooked it it's a responsibility.
Well,
And
I'm not
sure.
I'm not sure that that's, I'm not saying that that's a legal responsibility. All right. Just want to be clear about this. I do think it's a moral responsibility. I mean, if you issued a permit for dock and you took the permit fees for 36 years, I mean, I understand you could go back and say,
for
look,
a
it was
minimum
already approved. Sorry, go ahead. John?
We took permits for minimum fees for the 4x10 dock. You even said recently it was described as a 4x10 dock.
If you said to me, look, we're going to honor our original permit, which was by 4'10" float, I don't have much of an argument. I mean, what am I going to say? It was approved. We now know it was approved by 4'10". I think that I'm going to certainly argue that the catwalk was part of that approval. I mean, you know, I think Larry Penny's memo was what they would have followed.
Rick, are you saying that the current dock is 30 inches wide?
The dock, the floating dock?
The catwalk, excuse me, the catwalk.
Yes, I believe it's 2.5 feet wide. I haven't personally measured it, but I believe it's 2.5 feet wide.
Okay, because that's the dimensions I believe you stated in the recommendation memo.
Yes,
okay.
That's my understanding, that it's 2.5 feet wide, and that's what Larry Penny's memo referred to.
Okay, thank you.
So what is the environmental impact to having this catwalk there? I don't really know, ecologically, but we bring up moral obligation and legal obligation, and that, that's a really strong, those are strong words in this town. And when it comes down to ecology, and morality, I think there's a lot of grandfathered in things in this town that really probably shouldn't be for the sake of the ecology in the estuary. So I'd just like to know what is the ecological impact.
Well, let me give you an idea. So if there's no catwalk, I mean, I know it was John who was saying, how you could get to a floating dock if you didn't have a catwalk. I don't think the owner is probably going to swim out there. It kind of defeats the purpose to swim to your boat, but whatever, what do I know? The other way to get there is with a dinghy. So you drag the dinghy through the marsh every time you want to get to and from your dock. Is that better than having a catwalk?
Yeah.
Every time the person wants to go to and from their dock, they're going to store the catwalk back up on the property, possibly in the wetlands. They're going to drag it down to the water's edge, bring it out, tie it to the pilings at the float, and then sail away and come back and repeat the whole thing. Is that better than having a catwalk?
Didn't Larry,
you don't have to drag it.
Didn't Larry's original memo suggest putting the catwalk in to keep people from degrading the marsh by walking on?
Well, yes.
Oh. They got to walk through the marsh to get to the catwalk. He didn't.
I know, but
just the catwalk go to the upland.
Trying to interpret old Larry Penny memos. I'm pretty sure the trustees would have listened to what Larry said in those days.
Well, I'm pretty sure they would have too.
What the number of 4x4s that put in were the same as the number of pilings that were of galvanized pipe that were taken out, right?
That's my understanding. I don't have any photographs that I can compare that to, but I believe so. The catwalk might be 3 8-foot sections, and I know right now. I think. Well, I'm extrapolating from photographs. I think there are 1, 2, 3. I think there are a total of 8 pilings, 4 on either side.
And originally, the galvanized pipes were to be removed annually, which is disruptive to the bottomlands to begin with. But now we have permanent 4x4 structures.
Well, no. I think the plan would be that they would be removed, honestly. I think that you'd still remove them each winter. Otherwise, they would be damaged by ice. There are other docks in the town, I know, where the trustees have required annual installation and removal. And I think that you would annually remove this, even the catwalk. That was what was happening before my client bought the property. And just so you know, too, the dock is not, the issue arose, first of all, the catwalk and the dock stayed in through last year, through 2020, because they were still in the water when the property was purchased. We've since removed the float. The float is not in the water, and it hasn't been reinstalled because we're, coming back to you for a permit. And, we thought it would be disrespectful to put the float back in the water. So right now there's no float in the water pending the decision by you.
Well, I don't think we would, I don't want to speak for the board, but I don't think the board would have much of an argument granting a permit as it was originally written. And if it wanted to deliberate further on the catwalk and the poles and all the other stuff, do that over time. I mean, in a lot of ways, making these ad hoc decisions case by case, it may not be good for the trustees in the larger picture. I mean, if we, say, okay, well, all right, we'll let them do it with the catwalk and the whole thing. And then it turns out that there's other docks all around the harbor that we're not aware of, what the permit was and what they've got now. They're gonna, how are we gonna say, well, you have to comply with your original permit? I mean, in a lot of ways, we need to know what's going on in all the harbors with all the docks, or at least in Acoustic Harbor with all the docks, I would think, in order to make an intelligent decision on what to do with this particular situation. But I don't think we would necessarily not grant the permit for the 4x10 floating dock. It's a valid permit from 1984.
Right. So just to clarify, first of all, I mean, my argument in terms of grandfathering, I think, we have a grandfathered permit for a 4-foot-by-10-foot dock. I can't argue beyond that. I would ask you, and I do think that you should allow an 8-foot-by-10-foot dock because, 4-foot-by-10 is, like I said, there are issues with it. The narrowness of it, how you get to it with a ramp and possibly the ramp rolling off it. But I can see the original permit was for a 4-foot-by-10-foot dock. The other thing I do want to say, and John, apropos of your point, I've looked at aerial photographs and Googles and stuff like that. I'm not sure there's 5 docks in Acoustic Harbor. It's a very low number. Take a look, but I'm not sure that I'm not even sure there are 5 docks in that harbor. Maybe there's 5, maybe 6, but not more than that, unless people put something in illegally in recent times. Very small number of docks in Acoustic.
And to John's point, we are seeing a lot more interest in docks with new homeowners that are looking to install docks on their property. So there is an interest out there for sure. So I do think John has a somewhat valid point that we do need to take a more complete look at the situation with docks, because we do have a list of docks that seem to be unpermitted right now. It's more than just this one situation. Mm-hmm. So it is fairly complicated.
Let me ask you, and then and not to further muddy the waters here, but if you are going to take some time before you make a decision about the crane dock and/or catwalk, I do know that she's also applied for a mooring. Can she get a mooring permit so she can at least tie her boat up out there?
Personally, I think that the 4x10 dock and a mooring request are reasonable and should be permitted for her use for this year while we would deliberate on other aspects of her application. So personally, I think a mooring and her 4x10 dock are legitimate requests, and those should be granted while the bigger questions are sorted out. That's my personal opinion, and I have shared that with some members of the Harbor Management Committee that are starting to look at the mooring and dock issue.
Well, I would definitely agree that I think we should take some time and speak to each other and with our own attorney. But I think that if she's looking for a mooring, I think that would be an appropriate application that we should provide for her. In the meantime, we have the 4x10 dock. I think we have to take inventory of the docks that are on our waterways, bottomlands, and see, where we stand with all of them. I think we should put this on a table this for the time being until we can have a discussion amongst ourselves and with our attorney. That would be my personal feeling at this juncture.
I would share that opinion. And Rick, if you want to make a request for a mooring permit, I think it should be submitted to the office and it can be reviewed for the next meeting.
I do think a permit, my understanding is that the owner has submitted mooring permit request.
Then we should
agree with all that.
We should look at that.
I think I'd like to take a little step back from any docks. I don't know if there's, Rick, you're saying that there's 5 or 6 docks in Ecological Harbor. I'm not sure. I'd like to know more about how many docks there actually are there, because I'm taking a real step back about docks. And I think that a mooring permit would be probably the smart thing to do here. And then let us take a step back and look at what we want to do, because we're looking back into the 80s as far as our decision making, and this is not the 80s. This is now, and this is the future. And so I think that we really need to take a look at this. And I'm sorry about all the time and effort you put into this, Rick, but I think we need to take a look at docks as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me
look at the total inventory of docks that are currently established and see whose permits are up to date, whether or not, if there is a permit for what exists. I think that's our obligation as trustees to do that.
Let me ask this of the board, actually. I don't remember, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't remember ever having been brought to the board of any individual mooring permit that we had to approve or disapprove. This is kind of a unique case, I think. And can we basically state that we feel it's appropriate to grant a mooring permit in this case this year, tonight, and allow this mooring permit to be granted while we grapple with the other issues that we've talked about?
I don't mean to jump in, but a mooring application was submitted by her in March 14th, and we took it to Harbor Management. This has been kicking around in the office since March 14th, and it's June.
So can we make a motion? I'd like to make a motion then?
I'm asking the question, Susan, and I'm asking a question kind of our clerks, because I think, I don't know if we all should be chiming in. We're chiming in with opinions here, and I think we have to look to the leadership to make a decision like this. That's my personal feeling.
John, we did send this to committee, and I thought we had a consensus that a mooring would be an appropriate first step here. So that was the recommendation, I think, that came back from committee. But, let's hear from the clerks.
I think you and I both have expressed that feeling.
Yeah.
But again, I've never heard an individual mooring application coming to the board for approval or disapproval.
Right. No, I think it was because of the dock issue. Because of the dock issue that was pending, I think there was a hesitancy to muddy the waters any further. But if we are tabling the dock application, the mooring is, I think, a fair interim step. But I'll yield the floor to the clerks.
So you're requesting a one-time accommodation while we review the dock. Is that my understanding?
Yes.
Do we really have the responsibility
I'm not even sure
to
it's
do
an
that?
accommodation. I mean, we typically will grant a mooring permit to a waterfront homeowner. And given the nature of Acoustic Harbor, where a lot of the quote unquote waterfront homeowners don't necessarily own the marsh in front of them, and this is a case like that, I don't think we've, really looked at that on a case-by-case basis. It's been basically granted, people.
I mean, we did
Can't get
decide
mooring
to
permits.
steer, but John, in most cases thus far this year, we did encourage people to go to the predefined mooring fields. So when there was
Those were
capacity,
people-
we tried to
Those were
drive
people that
everyone there.
didn't live on the harbor, though.
Right. Well, there were near shore residents that were across the street, or they were nearby, and I would say this is a nearby property. They don't own the immediate shoreline upland of the harbor. But
if we were to grant a mooring here, I would want to make it absolutely clear that this was for this year only.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that if we end up with a mooring and a dock there, because we've permitted it in the past,
it's going to choke that creek out.
Yeah,
it'll dominate the entire creek, Francis. I agree. So I think it's fair as a 1-year permit, and then going forward, we either have a dock or a permit after we continue our deliberations on it. I think that's a fair approach.
Want to make a motion?
With that,
Yes. I'll make a motion to grant a permit for a mooring for 1 year only while we are discussing the dock issue.
I'd second.
All right, and to make it absolutely clear, there is no reason to expect this mooring to automatically be renewed next year. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, so we'll start with the mooring, Rick. Okay, and let's figure out what happened with the rest of the stock.
Okay, will I be waiting on you? Are you guys, are you going to delve into your records, or what? Should I be waiting for feedback from you?
You want to stop by you have any interest in stopping by the office tomorrow?
Sure, I'll come by.
Okay, I'll be around.
All right. All right, well, I just want to thank you all for the time, and the thoughtfulness. I mean, you're looking out for the public's waters and the public's resources, and I certainly understand that, and so does Cindy. So I appreciate your time and the effort you put into this. So, and I guess I'll meet with Chris. I'll meet with you.
Okay.
We appreciate your putting your time and energy into this to explain everything to us too, Rich.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
All right,
Rick.
Thank you, Rick.
Good night, guys.
Thank
Have a
you,
good
Rick.
night.
Good night.
All right. Jim dropped off to do the crab count, and I think we're going to be losing John shortly.
and
So,
hopefully Tim.
And hopefully
Tim
Tim.
also will likely have to leave as well.
Okay. Is there anything else that you need to address here before you leave, John?
Who, me?
The kelp farm? Anything new on that?
Well, I mean, I was, we met with the applicants, the Agriculture Committee met with the applicants last week. We also
Rick
met
was with you on that, right?
among ourselves.
Okay.
What's that?
Me,
Who else was there?
I was.
Susan and Rick?
I was.
No, I was discussing the powering with John and the
okay.
dock management
Okay.
issues.
Mike, myself, John,
Bill.
Bill.
Yeah, I was there for one of the meetings.
All right, so
Well,
you want to report on it?
My feeling is, and we haven't really discussed this as a committee since we met with the applicants as a committee. I think we need to come back together as a committee and come up with where we go from here. Just to make it clear, the application is for evaluating a number of sites in a number of harbors for 1 year. And that's what we would be permitting if we permitted this. But we really haven't discussed it since the meeting with the applicants, and I think we need to do that. And I bring it back to the next meeting. I think at that point, this board has to decide, and I guess we'll make a recommendation as a committee on this, whether we feel we have to go to a more formal period of public comment before we make take a vote on this, or whether we feel that this can be something that can be voted on in a near-term meeting.
Yeah.
That's just my personal take.
Well, the activity is not going to be taking place till the winter.
That's right. It won't begin till October, I would think, at the earliest, setting up here.
I think that's very reasonable for us to take our time to discuss it. We had discussed a more definitive plan from them, but there's a lot to be discussed and this is the first application of this kind. So it's a very interesting one. And, I think it's a slow process, but I like the idea that it would be open to public comment and questions would certainly be asked. It does have a different season than the scallops and so forth. So I think it's, there's a lot to be discussed still.
And I'd just like to point out that we did get an email letter today, just before the meeting, that Arlene distributed, that I didn't have a chance to read, and probably nobody else did, but there is some public comment coming in.
There was,
I was able to read it.
yeah, there was a big article in Newsday about it. I think it was today, about, kelp farming in general.
If you can send that around, that'd be great, Bill, because every time I try to go on the Newsday site, they want me to subscribe.
All right, I'll print it out.
It's on Newsday, Bill and John?
It's in Newsday.
Okay, I have it.
I have
I'll have to read
I
it.
have the copy of the one from a couple of weeks ago. I'll leave it in the office on the table.
Yeah, this was today. I think this was yesterday or today.
So the letter that you'll be reading in your email, which came from some resident and was shared with us just before this meeting, it brings up a good point. Kelp farming is new here, and it's not a species that we tend to see in our bays, in our inner waterways, and certainly not something I see every day. I did happen to see a little bit in Lake Montauk just yesterday, hanging off one of the docks. But, the point is, if we bring kelp into our harbor, does it take away the opportunity for natural occurring grasses like eelgrass or, things that might be better for the bays that we are accustomed to having? That's the point of that letter. And I can't just I have to say that could be very credible. So, research is being done before commercial kelp is open in New York State. And I hope, that's what the New York State DEC is working on right now. Let's get it right. We should only allow it if it's something that really is beneficial and good.
It could be beneficial. It could be looking at another invasive species.
That's the point of that letter.
To be continued.
Yeah, so public comment time is good. We have plenty of time.
Okay. Can we jump forward to powering our clams?
Yeah, that would be great, Francis. Thank you. It's good that John's here for this one. We had set forth a public comment period to receive comment from baymen or other members of the public that were interested, and we received no public comment regarding the 2021 powering season. Well, we did reach out to Marine Patrol, some other related agencies, and they expressed that there is a lot of pressure on local town management resources. The population increase in our community remains. There's a lot of pressure on the waters. Local resources are spread really thin. We also considered that a holiday time has good price support for shellfish. It is a reduced period of conflict with high season management, and powering is typically done in sheltered work areas. And these are things that we considered regarding the 2021 season. Other things that we consider were the trustees are not currently conducting any surveys or studies on any of our water bodies regarding shellfish abundance, and that perhaps all trustee water bodies should be considered for the powering season, but areas within each water body could be excluded. We think that the late fall / holiday timeframe might be a better choice for a powering season this year, but we would like to see a powering season happen for the bayment. So the recommendation that basically John and I came to after kicking this around for a while was that the season could open, if the board agreed, from November 15th to December 31st. That would be a consideration. And that would give us time to properly deliberate on this, allow further public comment, prepare a proper resolution, and not, kind of rush into a July 4th kind of a season when everyone's super busy and resources are spread thin. So that's the recommendation we came to through a couple of meetings and discussions with some other folks around town. John, would you like to say anything further?
Rick, when you say other people around town, oh, sorry.
I'll second that analysis. Yeah, I'll second that analysis, and I'll stick by that in the interim between that Thursday and today. I ran into a few baymen that hadn't talked to for a while. And we seem to be getting a consistent feedback that in particular, there aren't that many people that are really looking to power, and that, the summer season is the real season to make money. So I agree, and I will back what Rick said about late fall, winter season for the holiday market. But I think we need to continue to consider how we can possibly accommodate the needs of the few baymen that seem to be able to power and that are powering to the market that's most important to them. But this year, I agree, we'll hold off until November.
Question for both of you, and Mike, fisherman. Is the season 4 harvesting clams and better in the summer? Because that seemed to be the time that they wanted to do this last year, as opposed to the fall. Is there less
the market
product available?
Price.
They also, the clams go up and down. When it's cold, the clams tend to go deep and get away from that environment. So, it's a little more effort to get down to where they are. That's one piece. They're easier to catch when they're close to the surface.
Right.
It's a little,
so
maybe
does that
a little
have a deleterious impact on the bottomlands then during the fall? Is it's more damaging?
Yeah, you're gonna be digging deeper. You will be digging deeper. There is that. I'm just surprised that any of the baymen would suggest that market, because as a steamer digger, I used to dig steamers for a living. Yeah, we had a little market at Christmas if we really wanted to, but the summer market was the market.
Well, Mike, they didn't. We did.
There was no input, Mike, whatsoever. No.
I thought you had said that you had talked to some other peeps. Understood.
I said
there was informal discussion.
Gotcha. Okay, I was surprised to hear that they would suggest that that window. I would definitely think that it would be less impactful on the bottom and more impactful on their catch and ability to profit if we did it during the summer. So I would move for pushing that back and allowing for them to have August and into Labor Day. That would be my vote. But I'm just a board member with a layman's mentality.
Is there a reason that you've chosen the fall as the optimal time for this, as opposed to the summer?
Well, yes, Susan. We do need Marine Patrol to participate in this, and they're really overwhelmed.
Okay.
And we felt the second best market for pricing was holiday time, when there's typically higher demand for seafood. So we did try to consider it. And if we had gotten really any public comment, if anyone had spoken up on behalf of the Baymen, the people that are powering, but there was zero comment from anyone. So we really didn't have a lot of comment to work with.
Okay.
Actually, none. Zero comment.
Wow, I'm surprised. Even from the people who approached the trustees who want to power, they had no comment?
Zero.
Wow.
Yeah, we had Arlene at the office during the meeting in case anyone wanted to come in, and no one came in, no one submitted previously, and no one attended the call.
Well, I think the dynamic is now that, generally people approach individual trustees or even approach the office with their opinions.
It could also be that tonight they're watching and we will hear from them.
Well, if they want to reapproach, that's fine. We're happy to listen. But that's where we're at now. We're not making a resolution or voting tonight, but that was, where we got to
recommendations,
after reviewing it and talking to the other agencies in town that need to be part of this.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Mike, I just have one thought that ran through my mind when you talked about digging deeper for clams in the cold. My understanding of a powering setup is that you have a fixed engine of a fixed length on a fixed sled. I don't know, how would you dig deeper? I mean,
you just change the angle a little bit. You would change the angle that the engine is mounted. You can trim it with a either your what do they call it, the pin, or you can change the angle of the transom that you're mounted to make it dig deeper.
Okay. All right, that makes sense.
Francis, while we're on harbor management, should we finish up our discussion on the moorings and the docks, or do you want to table that for later in the meeting?
Well, I'm looking at the agenda, and John's actually leaving for the Horseshoe Crab Survey, and he's the only one left here who can comment on it. So maybe we should hear from him quickly on that.
Sure, no problem.
John?
Well, I'll just make a brief statement about the docks, and I can get into it with the crane discussion. We need to know what's going on. We're getting all these, individual requests, either for new docks or grandfathering in docks that seem to be permitted differently than they exist. And I think we need to set up a dock inspection schedule for 3 Mile, Acabonic, Hog Creek, and Napeague, although there's not only, I don't know if there's any docks in Napeague actually, but at least those 3 harbors, and portion out the work so that we can get this done. I think we have to do it. We have to look at the records, and Alice and Arlene have put together a nice list now of docks and all the particulars of them. So we have one place to go to look for them, or most of them. And I think we've got to get out there and see what it is we've got, and how they comport with what's in the permits and what we're charging for them. So we can
But
look
we
at
also
this.
have a lot, I think there's also quite a number of completely non-permitted docks out there. And the only
Well,
way
we'll
to
find
find
that
that
out.
would be to have, what we have, hold on one second. What we have is a list of docks that are permitted. The only way we're going to find the other ones is to do a survey. How do
No,
we
that's
do
my
that?
point.
Okay.
Can
That's
we
my
employ
point.
a drone for that? Can we use
We
a
need
drone
to
for
get,
that?
we need,
You know,
We take a boat ride.
you gotta take a boat.
Right, a boat ride or a drone is a very, very wonderful piece of equipment to really, in very little time, get what we need to survey the harbors to see what's actually there.
You can go on Google Earth and get a pretty good rough idea. I know.
Yeah, but that's not completely current.
It's probably not. I know.
however,
We took a series of photographs of all the waterfront properties from the water when we did the first LWRP. And I know Ramesh was there when we took, you know, he was doing the photography. And you basically have to go around in the summertime in a boat. It's the only way you can do it. Accurate.
We had talked about, John and I talked about each harbor committee being responsible for their respective harbor. And then, you know, the harbor management committee or the office staff would be responsible for collating the information and, you know, helping to organize it and present the information back to the board. So well, that was a thought we had that we wanted to kick
That's a good
around.
idea.
Yeah.
That's
So
a good
that way
idea.
the workload is distributed.
Yeah, what we do right now, we charge by the linear foot, the docks now, right? So a dock that's 80 feet long, whether it's 6 foot wide or 8 foot wide, would still get the same fee, right?
Yeah, and you really have to measure them. You know, there's a fair amount of work involved in this. So,
Yeah.
you know, if it's all right, I think we'd like to continue framing this out, and over this summer season when we have nice weather and calm waters, it would be a good time to try and do this. And maybe, you know, by the end of this year, it's the responsibility of this board in its current composition to take this on and then be able to properly deliberate on things like the Crane application or the McGinn application when we've gotten our ducks in a row.
Well, I think that's a great idea, and I think that we should do it. And I like the thought that each committee each person who serves on a committee of a harbor undertake that task so that we can bring all of this information together. I would like to point out that Mike's suggestion of a drone is a very good one. I think if I'm not mistaken, I believe Kim Shaw's Department of Natural Resources, they did train someone and certify them who is trained to use a drone. And perhaps we might want to reach out to that department and ask them if that individual has time to help us with this effort. And the other thing is, I am somewhat concerned that while we're discussing going forward about docks, that we may very well be in a situation with the McGinn dock. We've got an application before us now, and that application is not going to wait until we have finished with a survey of docks that are existing while we're deciding what we think we should be doing as trustees going forward pertaining to docks. So I think we have to focus on that application and make a decision and vote on that now, not by the end of the year when we've looked at all the harbors to determine what we want to do going forward, because it's a conflict of interest, in my opinion. I may be wrong, but I'd like to consult with our attorney on that. I do think that the application has been with us since last spring, and we're really ready to vote on it. I think we've had a lot of information. We've had many meetings with their representatives, and I think, you know, that we should be ready to vote on whether or not to approve this dock.
Susan, if I could just follow up on that we discussed that very thing, and that's one way of approaching it. we discussed another potential way of approaching it that I think the board can consider as well.
Mm-hmm.
And because this new dock application is so important, and because we have these unknowns out there regarding docks that the crane application kind of highlighted, the other alternative would be to put a temporary moratorium on any new dock permitting or applications until we can get a more comprehensive survey of what's out there, and then look at docks in a more comprehensive way, both what we have and what we might be approving or denying.
Have you spoken with
So
Chris
I don't-
Carrillo about the moratorium in the midst of an application that's been before us for almost for a year now?
We just
Does he have an opinion as to whether or not that would be to our benefit?
One or two meetings ago, it was decided by the board that the matter would go back to the Harbor Management Committee for discussion, discussion of docks in general.
I recall that meeting, but it's sort of there. These are two different issues. I'm asking about specifically the moratorium. Has Chris Carrillo spoken to Harbor Management Committee as to whether or not that would be a sound idea at this juncture?
So we just talked about this recently, possibility of an alternative of a moratorium. This is the first time we've.
So he's not been consulted about that?
No, we didn't take this beyond just having our own discussion of it.
I see.
I'm
Okay.
just relaying our discussion of it.
Okay, well, I would like to know his opinion as to whether or not a moratorium is legally really permissible at this juncture, since we have an application sitting before us for a year.
Well, a moratorium, I don't know. I don't know the answer basically, but it's a moratorium would be a given time after which it wouldn't be a moratorium. So, I don't know. It's really just kicking the can down the road for a period until we can get a more comprehensive look at things. I don't know.
I think personally, I feel we have a plan in place. We know what the criteria is. We know the plan. We know the dimensions, and we know all the equipment. We've had a thorough presentation by the representatives. So I think at this juncture, we are prepared, in my opinion, for whether or not you are for or against the dock. We are prepared. And it's not about right now we're just looking at focusing on one application. Going forward is another story. If you wanted to rethink harbor management plan going forward, I think that's necessary because we are seeing more and more homeowners come for docks. But I don't know how long how long you can drag something out when you have an application that's been there for a year with no response from the trustees, other than, to say, we're going to wait. Delay is really what it is. I think I'm focusing on this particular application.
Yeah, I think we need Chris here to continue this conversation as far as moratoriums go. He'll be at the next meeting, I understand. We also lost 2 board members tonight. So if you're thinking about voting tonight, I don't think that's going to happen either.
It's incumbent upon us to resolve this by the next meeting, and I think that's a realistic goal. And there is more to this conversation. So why don't we table it until the next meeting? We'll confer with Chris and have a better conversation at the next meeting. And either we have a path forward to do more homework, or we have a path forward to deliberate on this application.
And also the docks, they go further than the harbors. We should assess all of the waters, all of the docks in all of the waters, be it Georgia.
Mike. Oh, yeah, okay, the ponds, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
No,
And
that's the
then the
idea,
question
is
for
to
Chris
look, 'cause we had
also is-
discussed, moratoriums a long time ago, when we were deliberating on something in Georgia, and
Mhm.
we were going to initiate the moratorium then, and then, there were other matters that came before it, and we didn't really initiate it, and that was probably a mistake because, as time goes on, more applications come by, et cetera. But just to set the stage here, there was a discussion about us doing this a long time ago. And we should have acted probably at that time, but we did. So this is not a new discussion. It's just it was not memorialized probably when it should have been.
Right. Okay, so Chris
So
will be back next.
Chris.
He'll be back next week, next meeting, and then we should have this on the agenda at that time to discuss a moratorium and going forward.
That's fair.
Good night, everybody.
Oh,
Okay, so long, John.
have fun.
See lots of crabs.
Okay.
So privacy
Next
issue.
thing.
With just one quick little thing, just to finish it off, because on the drone thought, is there a issue with privacy if we put a drone up over somebody's backyard and we're, is that legal
No.
for us to do? That's the question for
Yes.
Rick. I mean,
We could keep it over all water.
okay. Good.
The difficult part is going to be identifying the properties. So we're going to have to film these things, I believe, and then match them up to the GIS.
Yeah.
So that we can identify the property that's attached to the dock.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I need to step away for a second. Next thing on the agenda is Lazy Point, Napeag, request from Susan Noble, leaseholder at 100 Shore Road in Lazy Point. She's looking for permission to replace an aging front step and deck. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll be right back. You guys. have a
I
nice
was,
chat.
okay, see you soon.
I
I visited with Mrs. Noble and I took some pictures. I sent them all to you of her deck and stockade fence that she pointed out on the way out to me. So I hope you received them. They were in your email. I was there on Saturday, and it's the original deck. And it is very rotted, and she definitely wants to replace the boards. It's really looking unsafe at this juncture for people to stand on it. She would sent a letter to our office, or brought it today. I believe if Arlene, you're here, can you verify that that letter came in asking, requesting the replace in kind wood, not treated, no toxic chemicals, just she wants to replace in kind the damaged, rotted wood. And I think that we should permit her to do that.
Yeah, I looked at the photographs, and it's a pretty simple matter. We should just make the repairs in place in kind with, with not treated material.
Right. And it's a safety issue at this juncture too. She also has a railing. I took a picture of the railing. She had been using a hose to hold it up. It's now fallen.
It's all necessary maintenance.
Yes. So I don't think we have enough people here to vote on it anymore, or what? Do we? Ben, Rick, yeah, we're all here. All right. So does anybody have any?
Do you want to make the motion, Susan?
Yeah, sure. I will make a motion that the Noble residents at 100 Shore Road in Lazy Point should be able to replace the rotted boards on the deck. And also there's a stockade fence. She would like to replace that in kind because that's being held up by bungee cords at the moment.
Yeah. Ready, second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Rick.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Well, Francis isn't here.
We have 5?
We have a
quorum.
All right. Thank you.
Wait till Francis comes back.
Oh.
Approved. Yeah.
Let's keep talking.
Approve. All All right. Well, I thank you.
Trip survey.
Salt marsh.
Yes, I'll be brief about that because I know it's getting late for everybody. It's 9:15. So this past Friday, we had a wonderful Salt Marsh walk. It included people from the Nature Conservancy, from the town of East Hampton, trustees. John and I were there. We also had Edwina Bongal of The Perfect Earth, because that's where my polygon ends. So Edwina is going to be a partner this year with the mosquito larvae water sampling. We had the DEC was there, and also a Peconic Estuary Partnership. And who else? Suffolk County Legislator Bridget Fleming. So I took a picture. I have two sets of pictures. We had some residents from Springs as well who are on the APC. They were also represented, Aquatic Protection Committee. And we had two marine biologists from Rutgers who are Springs residents as well. And it was a wonderful walk. We started out at was it 11 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock in the morning? And it was about a 3-hour walk. And we were looking and citing the hot spots, showing where the difficulties are. And Dr. Mara was very helpful in describing what could be done and what should be done. And so we're in the preliminary stage of this project, the habitat restoration, and there'll be obviously a lot more. We begin in about 3 weeks. Oh, I should also say Suffolk County Vector was there, Tom Iwaneko. And I took a group picture, and I don't know if I sent it to you all or not, but it was very nice to see everybody after a year of not seeing anyone other than on Zoom. So
the good crew.
Yeah, good crew, good crew. It was really terrific, and the energy is there, and everybody's excited about doing this project.
Improvements this year. That's
Sorry?
good. I said we're going to actually carry out some projects this year.
Yes, yes.
Good. All right, the kelp farming we've already discussed. I'm going to carry it over.
Kelp farm we discussed. Francis is back too.
You want to speak to the Rysam Scholarship?
Yes, I'll briefly run through this really quickly. I will be presenting. Only one person from Education Committee is permitted, and I've been in touch with the school and since the beginning of this project. So I will go back to the school. It is this the 27th at 5:30, and you have to show proof that you've been vaccinated, et cetera, et cetera. There will be 2 winners this year. I won't tell you who they are right now because I don't want them broadcast until the next meeting we have. But we have 2, and we have an anonymous donor who provided the second award. I'm going to move along to annual trustee donation to the scholarship fund. And I'm happy to report from Arlene that this year we received a nice sum of funds from Georgia Capon Sand Spoil, and the money has been deposited into the trustee account. And we also had donated in years past to donate $10,000 per year to help strengthen the Captain William Rysam Scholarship Fund. So that will add to our funds, $10,000. And we have more than doubled the fund from its original $24,000 in 2018 to $48,500 in 2020. So I'm very happy about that. And it's very exciting to see the fund grow. So thank you very much to the Georgia Pond and Ponds Committee for doing that this year again. And so that is the scholarship fund. And then balloon legislation. This past Thursday, I met with the town board work session. I was invited as an energy sustainability and litter committee member. I presented a proposal that had been on the agenda last year, but due to COVID, we postponed it. So we had support from Assemblyman Fred Thiel, who last year took it to Albany for the ban of the intentional release of balloons. And that's there with Senator Anthony Palumbo in the Environmental Conservation Committee, as well as the Assembly. I'm following it to see how it's going along, but that is in Albany, the intentional release of balloons right now. What I brought to the town was a proposal for a ban on helium and gas-filled balloons in the town of East Hampton. So it would not impact the village where the shops are located, but it's another step forward. And it was a terrific morning. I did a short slide presentation of the balloons found in our waterways recently over the last year. And that was Darrell Godfrey photographs, my photographs, and other people in the community. I presented that. And then the Avenue Studio School in East Hampton, they had contacted Tim Garneau, our trustee, and he brought the group to the education committee, and I suggested that they create a petition. They did. The 7th grader Teddy, I can't remember his last name offhand, but Teddy Hogbin, and he created a petition asking the town to do this, and so I posted that, and hopefully if you agree, you'll sign this petition. And they created also a cleanup video showing all the debris and the balloons that they collect. And it's their appeal as advocates to the town board to pass this ban. We also had the East Hampton Middle School. They were involved, the 6th grade class of David Cataletto. He and his students all were very excited about doing this and having the town take part. And lastly, but not least, is Aubrey Peterson and his environmental conservation group. One student wrote a wonderful letter and it was read by Aubrey. And the second letter was a group effort, another wonderful letter. And as soon as I receive them from Aubrey, I will post them to our website and social media. So the town was very receptive and we'll see what happens. You know, it's not to punish anyone economically, but I think, you know, little by little, the shops are realizing that these are single-use fossil fuel, petroleum-based items, and they really are very harmful to our environment, to our marine life, our avian life, and I'm excited about it. We'll see what happens, and that's it for education.
Okay. Is there anything else we have to touch upon with harbor management?
The one last piece was moorings, and we are seeing some unpermitted moorings being put out. And along with the interest in a dock review, we may want to consider a similar mooring review by water body. So John and Jim will be more prepared to discuss that at the next meeting. So we need to look at mooring and, you know, who's out there without permits, same thing.
You know, we got to
wedge numbers on the boats and have Marine Patrol run them.
We got to put an inventory together of all of this stuff.
That's correct.
And isn't Allison doing a thorough inventory?
She's doing an inventory of what we have. I guess what we want to do is go out and make sure that there's not a lot of stuff going on that we don't know about.
Yeah, Ben, there was 3 or 4 moorings put out already that I've seen that don't have permits on them.
They're not permitted. We'll have to go out.
That were dropped this year.
We're gonna have to get a bigger boat.
I think so, Bill. I think so.
Maybe just a boat, you know?
You can always use my oyster boat.
Yeah, I think we have access. We have access to boats, I think, so we can work on that.
We just got 2 new ones. I think we could borrow one for an hour.
All right.
Yeah, but you really need a boom.
It's a huge project between the docks and the moorings. A huge concerted effort. Big project.
Yep. So that was it, Bill. Thank you.
So we have administrative, the paying of the bills.
Oh, one last thing. I just want to jump in and say we have a special meeting this week with the Water Quality Advisory Committee for looking back at some former regulations and ideas. So I am, full on with that committee, and it's very interesting, and I'm learning a lot. So I'm excited to be part of the committee.
It's a good committee.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Bill, for letting me move into that slot. I'm enjoying it.
Hey, Susan.
Ben.
This is Ben. For the scholarship fund, should we consider having some sort of slight increase each year? Just so it stays current with inflation?
I think when I became a trustee in 2017, was it 2017 was the election, so 2018 officially. I think the amount of money that we gave was substantially lower than the first prize.
We increased it quite a bit to with the sand. We should probably discuss that with the whole board.
Right, but he's referring to the actual award itself. We had one award, Ben, the first year I was trustee, and then when I began to raise funds through the balloon T-shirts and so forth, the board voted to raise the first prize, and we did a substantial. We raised it substantially that first time after the first year, and then the second year we had a donation specific to the second. I had advocated for a second award, and we had a specific donation for that second award. People were watching, and they sent in funds for that specifically. Last year, we had another donation anonymously for the second donation, and this year the same. So if we want to discuss raising the first prize and second prize, that would be a board decision and something to discuss at a later time. But I appreciate that thought.
I think we should discuss investing the fund in a conservative portfolio that grows at a slow rate, and then we can use the income from that towards the increase in the award.
We have talked about that. In fact, Jim Grimes, are you here, Jim?
No.
His fire department model does just that. And I know, Ben, you had called me a couple of weeks ago about this. So if you want to propose that, we could put it on the agenda for next time, because it is getting late. I think everybody wants to say.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to bring it up.
Yeah, no. Why don't we put it on the agenda for next time? And because you had specific plan or some venue that you thought might be of help to us, and that would be terrific. I would love to hear about it.
Great.
We can talk about it during the week.
We've checked this a couple times already.
What's that, Bill?
There's legal questions, and there's we had discussed different places to put money, and it's a little complicated, right? You have to follow some legal advice. So I think we should discuss it at the next meeting.
Yeah, Ben, why don't you and I, Francis and Tim, discuss it before the next meeting, and then you come up with the plan to propose and speak to the board about it, and we can talk with Chris Carrillo.
Okay.
Okay, but thank you.
Yep.
Is Francis, are you here?
Yep.
Yeah.
There.
Oh, do you want to do the bills, or?
Sure. Payment of the bills. We have intact insurance, $596. An additional insurance premium.
I took care of that. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
I don't have that on my agenda for some reason.
What?
Oh, well. I don't have any of the expenses.
So, let's see.
Okay. Let me read them and you'll, okay.
I'm listening.
Intact insurance, $596, additional insurance premium for the new pump out boat. We have the East Hampton Star, $25.71 for a legal ad. Montauk Anglers Club, $381, scheduled service for a new Yamaha engine. Montauk Marine Basin, $197.73 for supplies. East Hampton Marina, $147.80 for fuel. Do I have a motion to pay the bills?
Motion to pay the bills.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Anyone opposed? Okay. I don't have anything else. Does anyone have anything they want to discuss before we say goodnight?
Good night.
Good night, Gracie.
Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Okay.
Adjourn.
Have a lovely
Is there a
evening.
second? We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, good night, everybody. Thank you.
Everybody.
Good night.